and you're very welcome along to another edition of the Staff Room. The Staff Room aims to be a 30-minute program by educators for educators, and we want to hear from you. So we're going to break from tradition a little bit today, and we're going to let the participants in our staff room introduce themselves. So, Sean, I'll start with you.
Sean Gallagher. At the moment, I'm the Director of Incorporation in St Angela's College, where the college has been incorporated into NUI Galway. Prior to that, I was Principal of Attimass National School, Ballina, County Mayo. And prior to that, I was Deputy Director of the Professional Development Service for Teachers, with responsibility for the use of technology in teaching, learning and assessment. And
Ciara, over to you.
Hi guys, my name is Ciara Ni Dhrisceoil and I'm a teacher in Gael College to Limni. We're a one-to-one school and I'm an assistant principal. I have been for the last 10 years and I would have a senior digital leader role within the school.
Thank you very much. Now, I'm going to jump straight in. Sean, you were at a teach meet during the week. And it's part of the reason why I wanted to talk to you today. Basically, I wanted to talk to you about two things. One was what you're doing in your neck of the woods at the moment and during this time, this strange time that we're having. And two, I wanted to talk to you about the Teach Meet. So let's jump to the Teach Meet first. How did you find the Teach Meet, Sean?
I thought the Teach Meet was a fantastic exchange of ideas amongst a group of very well-informed teachers, school leaders and educators, not just in Ireland, but abroad. It was a meeting of minds, and I suppose there was some people who were looking at very practical tips that you can implement straight away in the classroom, and there were others taking a more philosophical viewpoint as to where we find ourselves now. The Teach Meet was a united audience of all of those who are interested in advancing the use of technology in teaching and learning. And I suppose we now find ourselves where technology is being used in education far more than we could ever have envisaged in a very short space of time. But the goalposts have moved. And I suppose that's what I feel we have to consider in all of this, is how are we going to react to this moving of the goalposts in order that we don't lose sight.
And Sean, just to bring you back to the Teach Meet. So for those of us out there, or for those out there who don't know what a Teach Meet is, can you give us sort of in your own words what it is?
It's short 3-minute or 6-minute inputs on some use of digital technology in teaching and learning that you can share, that you can condense in the hope that it will pass the I'm going to try that tomorrow morning test. Because if it doesn't pass the I'm going to try that tomorrow morning test, it's probably just far too advanced to be mentioned at a Teach Meet. A Teach Meet it's like a cooperative of practice that you feel and you are convinced is effective enough that you are willing to share with your peers.
Was there many involved in the Teach? Now, this Teach Meet was different to normal Teach Meets, whereas this one was online. So how did that come about? What was that like?
I found it was good. It was using Zoom. I suppose Zoom has achieved huge use in the last few weeks. Remember, the title of it was Mehel, and Mehel certainly in Ireland is a fantastic way of working. It was where all the neighbours came together and no money was exchanged, but somehow all the hay was saved, all the turf was put into sheds, all the animals were minded. It's at the essence of a community working together. And when you look at CESI and the CESI community, that's what that's what is often mentioned. But at the core of it has to be sharing of ideas and working together. So, yeah, in that regard, I think it was true to the essence of what CESI is about.
And was it open to like, do you submit your ideas? Are they randomly picked? Is there an order?
Yeah, so I submitted my idea just on a shared document, and then afterwards the moderator arranged them into a running order, and everyone knew who was coming first and last thereafter. But it gave people time, and there was a fantastic exchange of ideas. I suppose one thing maybe we need to keep an eye on is that if anyone is listening to this, to a teach meet or a mehel for the first time, that they're not overawed by the sheer expertise of the people there, and rather that they can leave it feeling, yes, I got something from this mehel. I feel I was supported by the mehel, and I'm going to try that in my classroom, or I'm going to try that in my new foray into communicating with my students who are now homebound through no fault of my own.
Ciara, without putting you on the spot now, have you got much experience yourself with teach meets?
Not directly with teach meets, but actually now that you mention it, we had the focus of our digital learning plan was actually collaborative, teachers collaborating together. And actually on the 16th of March, we had sort of culminating to the pinnacle of our plan was a day of professional learning, where the staff were providing professional learning for each other. And we had a sort of almost a teach meet planned within that, where staff who were happy to do so shared their practice. But not directly in the teach meet now that Sean is talking about. But another way that I suppose in our school, in our situation, we do share a lot through Twitter as well. And all of our departments, our subject departments and extracurricular departments would have Twitter accounts, and we would share in that way. But Teach Meet is actually something that is on my to-do list to sort of develop a bit further, yeah.
And is it something you're thinking about? Are you going to have it within the staff room, or are you thinking about a bigger education centre idea?
Well, I actually have been a manager and part run at the local Apple RTC. Actually, my husband is the manager of it this year, and we had discussed actually developing that for next year. Moving away from the sort of workshop scenario to a teach meet, because we feel we've kind of almost plateaued a little bit in that sense. And a lot of people who attend them have kind of reached the par as such. So we were kind of looking at that for next year. In my own staff, I was hoping to, and I always do, is kind of start off kind of small. So I was going to do a lunchtime thing and maybe provide coffee and lunch to sort of entice people to come along, and then see how it develops. So that's how I was going to start it in staff. Again, that was kind of the plan going forward from the day that we had planned. But the day that we had planned on the Monday where the school was closed, we just moved it online. So I don't feel that has in any way stopped. We set up a Google Classroom for staff. So where it's called Coordinatory, so just where the teachers collaborate and share and post up any issues they might be having, and other teachers put up how-to videos, links. So we have continued the plan, but online. So I'm really happy with the way that's kind of progressing. Things have not said, we haven't stopped. We're going to continue, and I think that teachers are sharing so much more, and I'm really enlightened to see it. And I know it's out of necessity, but it's quite powerful to see, you know, the uptake and people really kind of engaging in these kind of platforms, where before they might have been optional and you would be trying to entice teachers in. You know, it's been a catalyst really for technology and education.
I love that idea. I love the sharing idea of this is what I'm doing, this is what's working, but most of all, this is what's not working. I think that's key. I think we tend to forget about this. We tend to go in and say, look, this is what's working. I'm a champion. We have a champion in our school and we're doing all this amazing stuff. Whereas from a personal level, I've had most success from discovering what wasn't working. and why it wasn't working. And you know what? Sometimes if technology is the issue, then remove the technology. But it's also important to mention that teach meets are not necessarily about the technology.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just about what I'm doing in my classroom. Sean, back to yourself. It goes without saying, and it's the phrase has been bandied about, unprecedented time, etc., etc., etc. What's your take on things at the moment?
Well, my take on, I suppose, I've tried to stand back and in my evenings, I suppose I've been responding to a few requests from local schools, you know, just to help them out. And really, I suppose what planning schools had done in relation to the use of technology in teaching, learning, and assessment, as I mentioned earlier, the goalposts have moved because all and most decisions were made on the basis that this was going to happen in the school. So, for example, maybe a platform decision as to what devices will be in the school, a decision as to the quality of the broadband and the connection and whether we need Wi-Fi routers in each classroom. That decision had been made. At the moment, that decision is redundant. Now, the main decision is, well, how can I bridge the gap between the teacher and the class and have that open, and is there a way of having two-way dialogue? But my fear is that there has been far too much attention on platforms and devices, etc., to the detriment of the teaching process. And without laboring the point, I think that we're in danger of cheapening the profession and making the profession to be less than what it is if it becomes a way of just assigning work to students and the students complete it, but there's no feedback, there's no two-way dialogue, there's no clarifying questions. As what at the heart of face-to-face teaching is a magical dialogue that takes place between the teacher and the student. And I've written it before in terms of sometimes you're met with the sparkling eyes of understanding, and other times you're met with the blank face of utter confusion. And as the professional, you have to work out, how am I going to deal with this situation here? If all we're doing is using technology to send workbook sheets or to send work home in the hope that the faces of confusion are going to become clear at home, I think we're cheapening the profession. So we have to provide in some way the same structures, the same differentiated approaches until such time as we're back in a face-to-face situation, but we learn and we reflect on the process.
Do you think there will be a reflection process, or will it be a case of, oh, thank God we're over it?
I suppose anecdotally is not backed up by any empirical research like that. I think people have had a chance to be more reflective because we're not chasing around the place. I know for myself, I'm not running to football training or athletics training, or I'm confined to my 2-kilometer zone. I take exercise, but I have far more time to think and reflect. And I think that's something that's shared, and that I've had a number of conversations with friends or, who would say, I think this is going to bring about change forevermore, that the changing nature of work. And ironically, just during the course of the work that I'm now doing, I read a report that was produced in Europe, I think it was only last year, and was called The Changing Nature of Work and Skills in the Digital Age. And ironically, the one area that said that would be impacted least by the digital age was teaching. Because of it recognized this magical dialogue, this development of cognitive skills, but also higher order thinking skills that are at the core of it, and that it wasn't just something that you could transmit. And so I think, yes, education will change, but it should not go completely onto online education, because I think we're selling, again, the profession short.
I suppose my point is that when all of this is over and done, and it will be soon enough, and we will get through this. But when it's done, do you think, in your opinion, now we don't have a crystal ball, but I'll put this to both of you. Ciara, please feel free to join in. Do you think that we're back in our classroom in June? I'm back in my school. Do you think that teachers are going to sit down and reflect about what happened and how to move forward with the new skill set? Or will they just go, no, let's just thank God we're back in the classroom. Let's just go back to the way things are.
Yeah, well, I think number one, it's just made people realize, I'm speaking personally and speaking to my colleagues, is how much we love teaching and miss the human contact. And there was this kind of real drive in post-primary, again, I speak for my own kind of staff and that, but this really quick drive to do online classes and to have that connection and that, communication that Sean had mentioned earlier that I suppose can be missing. I mean, to go back a little bit, but in the case of my son who's in senior infants, we were in week 3 and we had gotten the work for 2 weeks from his teacher. And then in week 3, she started to use Seesaw. And just hearing her voice, and for my son, Killian, to be able to respond and say hello, it really was not about the work. There was no request to submit work. It was just that communication, and it lit up the whole house to feel like there was that kind of connection. And that's what it is about the teaching. It's not so much about the content, it's about that human connection. And in our situation in post-primary, I did the statistics there. We had I did a survey on staff every week, and we had an 80% increase within 1 week of staff doing online classes with their students. And when we met as a staff to discuss it, again, it wasn't about how quickly people were getting through their plans. It was feeding back what the kids had said to them about how they were feeling, about the challenges that they had at home. And that was the most important thing. So I think there's kind of, people can complain about their jobs and complain about this, that, the other. I think there's a sort of a gratitude now among staff for the kids that we teach and being with them. So I think in that sense, I think this has changed the whole world. We're all come through this together. So I think it's going to unite us a lot more. We've had to collaborate more. We've had to collaborate with parents a lot more and students a lot more. So everyone has had to mature in a certain sense. I think without a shadow of a doubt, it is going to make people reflect. It's going to make people feel like, God, if this happens again, are we prepared? Are we going to be in a better position if something like this happens again? I think from a post-primary perspective, I think I was even mentioning to my husband, who's also a teacher, I said, imagine now next year if I have to go to a training course, or if I have to give a training course or something like that, imagine the quality of work that I leave behind. Because I'm used to recording my lessons now that, there's really, there's no excuse, it's like just pre-record the lesson and away you go. So I think that, again, it's the difference depending on the school and the situation. But I think that the quality of, I suppose, the teaching that happens through technology will naturally improve, which can only be a good thing. But I do know that a lot of different schools are in a lot of different positions. So look, I think for sure things are going to change, but I think for the better.
Yeah, Sean, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I suppose I might take maybe a student's or parent's perspective as well, Hassan, on this one, because I now find that my own children are using technology, and I suppose the term that I'll use is they're catching themselves being good. So, for example, they are, when they're completing a project, one of them was taking a picture of the outline of his project first, instead of presenting just the final product, so that even if the final product goes pear-shaped, he can demonstrate that the outline that he created first was fairly sound and fairly effective. So what he's doing is capturing the process as much as the product. The other thing is that I've been talking to schools that have very simple ideas like, you know, can you send me in a cloud diary, the different clouds formations that are in the sky, plant diary, your 2 kilometer zone diary, you know, and it's, you know, letting people see that not all learning comes from a book, and that it's as much to do with learning about what is around you and acknowledging what is around you and asking questions about what is around you and allowing technology to be the conduit through which you can pose those questions. So I think if we can reflect on the education process and use technology in that way, I think this could be, even though this is a terrible inconvenience and a fear for everybody, it could be actually something that will yield a lot of positivity in years to come.
And Ciara, I'm going to go to you in 1 second, but before I do, and this is to both of you, what are some of the restrictions or issues or pushback is the wrong word, but what are some of the restrictions or issues people are having, parents are having, students are having, that you've come across?
I suppose, well, in our situation, we are one-to-one iPads, so we're blessed that the students do have the technology. But even at that, at home, they might run into issues where in the school they may have been able to go to someone in the school. So there hasn't been many, to be fair, but there's a lot of troubleshooting that goes on, and sometimes you can feel their frustration on the other end. You know, and sometimes I've just picked up the phone to a parent to and let's just talk through it. So there's that kind of, I suppose, digital literacy of parents as well, where they're coming from and how comfortable they are with the technology. There hasn't been many reports in our case or in our school of poor internet, but for those who do have poor connection, that is another stress. So there's a lot about well-being and stress and anxiety that we need to manage and be very cognizant about. And normally parents, and students less so, but normally parents, when we do contact them, will be quite open and let us know those sort of situations. So, you know, that's mainly kind of the issue that we may have had. I think, again, well-being, people's stress, and students managing, I suppose, their workload. And I suppose having the maturity and the ability to prioritize, that's another issue that we've had. So again, it's kind of all coming back to well-being and students managing their workload and parents managing the student workload as well. But I think we've been pretty good at the communication piece and making sure that we're connecting with those students who need extra help. And for the likes of me and other teachers who would be on, say, the digital learning team and beyond, it kind of means that we have to be quite reactive. And, you know, I would check my emails a lot. I don't like to let things fester or stress to kind of accumulate if they can't log in because they don't have their Apple ID, things like that. So it has led me to feel kind of switched on a lot of the time. I feel like I can't really shut down. And I suppose a lot of teachers would feel like that as well. The Easter is a great kind of breathing space, but when we're in the work environment, I've heard teachers say this, again anecdotally, but that there's no, you're at home, so there's no off button, there's no downtime. So again, I'm kind of looping it all back to well-being, mental health, stress, and all those kind of things that are really, and everyone's situation is so different, and trying to get as much information as you can while being cognizant of everyone's situation is very, very, it's the challenge, you know. I think we're overcoming it, and technology's been great to help us with that, but still, you know, it's very important that we pick up the phone and talk to people, you know, and to actually have that communication as much as possible. And with our students, I mean, you know, with Google Meet, Zoom, and things like that, like, you know, as time progresses, and students have responded to us and said that they love it. They really, really love it, you know. So for us, we're kind of, you know, gently supporting and helping teachers towards that, while still being cognizant of people's home situations and being very different. So they have kids at home, you know, and not expecting it, but helping people as much as they can. So there's.
And Sean, what about yourself?
Yeah, I suppose maybe I've been in communication with more primary teachers than post-primary, and Ciara has captured the post-primary perspective very, very well. I suppose the main thing would be devices again, and the type of devices that are available at home with which to communicate, and the extent to which the child has access to it. So it seems to be that mobile devices in terms of phones and in terms of tablets are the ones that seem to be at home. And then if there is a laptop, it generally is a laptop, whereas there might be 3 or 4 kids in the house. So there are some of the issues. Other issues deal with consistency in terms of the amount of work that's assigned, and whether we like it or not. There's a certain comparison between schools, but you know, that's no different to normal. The main issue I would get from teachers in particular is digital etiquette. So that teachers are very good at establishing the ground rules when communicating in a classroom. And we all have our conventions for greeting and salutations, and when to ask questions and when not to ask questions. And when you're now using an online platform, be it Edmodo or Seesaw or be it Google Classroom, and the teacher types out a message and it's good morning, and suddenly gets 29 more good mornings or yup, or one child decides they're going to try to, you know, put in a less than complimentary. How do you deal with it? And you see, you haven't had an opportunity to establish the ground rules if you're now using it for the first time. And you're playing catch up all the time until you get an opportunity to gather stock and plan for it meaningfully. And so there's going to be an element of that we are now using this in advance of doing a lot of the groundwork with the students first. And so it's just one word of advice that I would give to schools, that look, things are going to happen that you didn't expect, and you're going to have to react accordingly. But start simple. If you start simple instead of being overly ambitious, you can build on that. Whereas trying something overly ambitious and then failing with it, it's, you know, I don't think it's good for you as the professional facing the children, and also it's not a good experience for the children or indeed the parents either.
Yeah, I think that's something I say to teachers all the time, is don't put yourself in harm's way and don't put your students in harm's way. So if you're putting out an assignment and you're afraid that they mightn't get it back, or there might be something might happen along, don't put the student in our way. Make it as easy as possible.
Yeah.
So the student doesn't fail, if that makes sense. Yeah. So and the same goes for you. So don't overcomplicate your deployment of Google Classroom and all your breakdown. Keep it simple, and students will feed back. One of the questions I got, and I want to go over to Ciara. But one of the questions I got, and I mentioned it last week, was a teacher came up to me and said, "How do I know if my students are getting my notes?" And it's back to what you were saying, Sean, and indeed, Ciara, you touched on it as well. The nonverbal communication is so, so important. So when the teacher is delivering the notes in the classroom, she knows by looking around whether they're getting it, they're not getting it. It's the first time they've heard these notes. Like when we were in school, it was magic. How did the teacher know that we'd never seen these notes before? So it's just don't put yourself in harm's way. I think that's key, or your students. Ciara, I want to jump across to you, and I asked Sean at the start, how are you finding things during this? And again, it's bandied about unprecedented time, whatever. But how are you finding things now? How are you dealing with this situation at the minute?
Yeah, I suppose the day that we broke up, we I mentioned earlier on, we had planned a day for the following Monday, so it was a Thursday. The following Monday, we had planned a day where the digital learning team had designed a day of professional learning for the staff. So we were kind of lucky in that sense that we had some resources immediately that we could share with staff. Like that, then we created the Google Classroom and to prepare practice, and then the surveys. The survey I have found to be very, very helpful, because I within the survey I didn't ask too many questions, but down at the bottom, a question about if there's anything that we can help or if there's any difficulties that you're having. So what we were able to do then was, based on what the teacher had written, we were able to contact the teachers individually and deal with any sort of issues or queries that they had individually, rather than bombarding the whole staff with content and material that they didn't really need. But at least with Google Classroom, teachers could drop into that. But I found that was again, sort of individual contact was very, very important, to sort of be able to contact that teacher and say, okay, let's talk through what's going on with you. So that has been very important. And staff have been really, really reaching out and saying thank you so much, a lot more than they would have at school. I think they're kind of their gratitude is palpable at the moment. Like, it's okay. So that's important. I think what's really important is, as colleagues, that we talk. We all probably have our WhatsApp groups and things like that, but there's a lot of troubleshooting that goes on within those groups, kind of casually, where people might kind of say, these are the stresses that I'm having at home, these are what I'm finding difficult. Like, one of the difficulties I found with a couple of members of staff was that they were just taking on too much. So, as you had mentioned earlier on, to take it easy, take it, one step at a time. Some of them were trying to record lessons, do live lessons. They were taking on far too much, and they found that they were being very overwhelmed by the amount of work. Now, our principal and deputy principal have been great in contacting staff, or generally in our meetings, and saying, look, take it down a level, be kind to yourself, don't try and take on too much. And because when you're taking on too much, well, then the students get overwhelmed as well. So trying to bring it back to kind of basics again. But in that sense, we've been doing that. We've also surveyed students, and we've had a meet with our student council. So student voice is still very important. So they were able to feed back really, really good information to us. They found the first week quite difficult. The second week, then, they found that teachers kind of had figured out the most appropriate kind of workload. They were able to feed back to us that they liked it when teachers scheduled according to their timetable. So using Google Classroom, they scheduled in their classes and set dates for their assignments. So again, kind of a lot around helping students manage their workload. So we were able to go create some support videos for teachers really quickly using Screencastify, to remind teachers about how to schedule and to show them, what it looks like from the perspective of the student, because parents were getting overwhelmed about what was meant to be submitted and when. So that really helped. So kind of showing teachers the perspective of the student and the parents. And then the other thing that we did was we had a Google a spreadsheet. So we had tabs for first to sixth year, and teachers were inputting students who weren't responding through Google Classroom. I don't like to say participating, because it's not really participation, but submitting some bit of work. And it basically kind of, if there was a number of teachers reporting that a student was submitting work, it just raised a flag for us to contact the student and contact the parent, not in a punitive way, but in a supportive way, and say, we've noticed that you're not submitting work. Is there anything that we can do to help? And then, to ring parents, and that has been really, really helpful. And it's made us all kind of look at it, because the whole staff are looking at this and helping each other to help the students. So it's all coming from a sort of a support angle, rather than anything else. But we've been able to monitor then quite closely, I suppose, the statistics and the sort of weekly improvement of participation and students engaging in the material. And again, we're not concerned about the quality of the work that they're submitting or anything like that. It's just that when they are submitting work, we know they're kind of in a good place. They're in a place where they're happy to work. They're in a place where they're maybe focusing on a bit of work rather than focusing on everything else that's going on, and that it can be a good distraction. So all of those kind of things that we've been doing are just ways of, again, improving communication between everybody. And once we can communicate, once we hear that people are okay, we're all relieved and we're all kind of on the same page. So there are a few of the different things that we've been doing.
And for those teachers out there who are, they're struggling a bit, to say the least, a simple case study would be a teacher working from home. Let's not forget, son number 1, son number 2, and son number 3 are at home as well. And they're having to struggle with technology. Is there any bit of advice you can give? Is there a way you can point them in the right direction? Hang in there, sort of?
I suppose the one thing is that if technology is required, is that you need, and you don't have a device for every child, you need to assign times that the child will have it, because you also have to get your work done as well. So, it's all around, we talk about classroom management. Now it's home management, and it's time management. And if I might deviate slightly from that, and the other thing then is just that in the absence of having, I suppose, the digital etiquette setup that I mentioned earlier, it's going to fall on, unfortunately, on the teachers and the parents, to provide that in the absence of what you would have liked to do. So maybe teachers, might have to send a little explainer, very, very brief, just to assist the parents with these things. We're all learning on this. And if I might deviate from it for a moment, I suppose one project that I have been involved in over the years is the development of a selfie. It's what's called selfie. It's a European project. Ciara will be aware of it as well, where the perspective of the school leaders, the teachers, and the students is all taken on board. But I contacted the core selfie team in Seville in Spain, just in the run-up to this podcast, more or less asking them, well, look, we're in a new set of circumstances here. We were all planning for school-based deployment of technology, and they are changing the selfie questions or adding new selfie questions to it, taking on board that we're now operating under a different set of circumstances. So I hope to have visibility of these questions from the school leader's perspective, from the school teacher's perspective, and also from the student's perspective. So I hope to have sight of the new questions next week, because I anticipate that they're going to take into consideration the type of issues that we have yet to tease out properly. What can be done to support students at home? What organization can we put in place to make the deployment of technology and digital learning at home easier? And easier not just for those who are lucky enough to have the technology at their disposal, but where, we speak about there has been talk over the years about a digital divide. And then there has been talk, probably more accurately, about a digital use divide. So that the digital divide is, I think most homes are now bridging that. They have some, aspect of technology, most of them do. The digital use divide focuses more on the effective use of technology versus the ineffective. And I suppose that's where, we really need to get to the core of this, is the effective use of the technology, rather than just having it there. And it's a very passive form of transmission in terms of education.
If anybody wants to get in touch, I think it's important to mention at this stage, before we wrap things up, that if anybody wants to get in touch, the CESI list is always a good place to start, www.cesi.ie. There's a forum there. Sign up to the forum. If you're a teacher and you have any questions, please feel free to throw them there. And last count, the CESI forum was in around the 2,000 teachers on it. So if you have a question, and it doesn't have to be about technology, it can be anything, you will find somebody there that'll answer it for you. Also, you can contact us on Twitter, so at CESI Tweets. If you have any questions, drop us a line on Twitter. If you're not on Twitter, do you know what? Type my name into the internet, and I'm not the fellow with the beard, I'm the other one. In Ireland, you'll find me, you'll find my contact details. Drop us a line. We'd love to help you. Like I said last week, we're not just about we are the champions and this is what we're doing. We're about supporting teachers in general. And my call tends to go out to those who are maybe struggling a bit and don't know what to do. And this can be very overwhelming if you don't know what to do. For me, I was clearing out my shed 2 minutes ago, or should I say half an hour ago, looked at the clock, opened up my laptop, went on to a meeting, started recording this. It was second nature to me. To somebody else, that's a whole hour's process of sitting down, preparing. So please, if you have any questions about what the process is or how best to improve the process, let us know. We're definitely here to help. If you were watching last week's program, you'll know that Chris normally finishes with some tips and tricks about what people are doing in the classroom. For bandwidth reasons, these are real world problems now. I'm after discovering that by having 2 less participants in the Teach Meet, my bandwidth recording and bandwidth has just improved. So I think we might stick with this from now on, unless, of course, you want us to change. The tips and tricks haven't gone away. If you log on to the CESI website, www.cesi.ie, if you find this video on the CESI website, you will see in around there a Padlet. And a Padlet is the digital equivalent of a notice board, where we've just pinned some tips, some tricks, some resources that you might be able to use. And I think you'll find it really, really useful. Ciara added to that today, which I completely forgot or overlooked. She said, why don't you add another column with teachers to follow on Twitter? I think that's a really good idea. Is there anything you guys want to add?
No, just happy to contribute in any way, and certainly to back up your point, Hassan, about that start simple, and that often it's where to start. People are struggling with, and certainly I'd be more than happy to contribute. If you put my name into Google, I'm not the fellow that went for the presidential candidate or for the presidency. So on Twitter, it's Sean ICT Mayo, and I'm more than happy to field queries there.
I was just going to add one thing to sort of reflect again on what you were saying, what you were both saying, in relation to teachers and where they should go if they're looking for help. And I suppose the most important thing is, I feel, is just to keep on talking and keep on reaching out to people and telling them about any kind of issues or obstacles you might be facing. So there's loads of great support here with CESI on Twitter, but really don't be afraid to reach out to your principals, your deputy principals, and people who will just kind of put you at ease, okay? Because I think like that, a lot of people are trying to do everything and trying to be amazing at everything. And starting small is very, very important. So that I just wanted to add that, just to keep talking and keep reaching out.
Yeah, and it would be remiss of me not to mention my former colleagues who I know in the Professional Development Service for Teachers, the ICT team in particular, who I know have gone far and above the call of duty in putting online supports in place. So it's just to go judiciously through those supports and see which one best suits you and best suits the stage that you are with regard to digital readiness, and just to start simple from there.
That is absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much, guys, and we will chat soon.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Take care, Hassan.